Merry Christmas, everybody, and happy holidays, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and whatever else we have offended you by excluding. I'm Irshad Manji. Welcome to the co-splainers podcast, and I'm joined by my two lovely elves.
I'm Meghan Cox Gurdon with what looks like a chastity belt on the ceiling behind me. It is, in fact, a really cool light fixture put into the house that I'm in by the previous owners.
And I'm Danielle Crittenden, and Meghan, no one can see that. It's a podcast.
You can,
You're mistaking audio for, video.
It's called a podcast because it's audio. And by the way, Irshad, I don't identify as an elf. And I'm really, I don't want to say I'm offended, but it's going to be really hard for me to go through this podcast having to explain to you that I am not elf identified. So I'm elf curious. I'm elf curious.
Are you elf adjacent?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, I don't know if I'm elf adjacent. I'm kind of elf curious, but welcome to our holiday edition, everybody. Just a quick note. We were supposed to be joined by our beloved co-splainer, Caitlin Flanagan, and she's feeling under the weather, so she's not joining us for this episode, but we did want to discuss this really incredible article she had in the Atlantic about the children's classic TV Christmas special called Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and she wrote an article that said, don't subject your kids to Rudolph, and it was almost... Caitlin's not Jewish, but it was almost a bleak Talmudic reading of this otherwise, special that certainly we all grew up with. I'll if you want, I'll just give the highlights of what she said. And there's a lot to it. It's, unlike Frosty the Snowman or a Charlie Brown's Christmas, what was fascinating, and again, I'm sorry, Caitlin's not here to do this, but summarize it. But basically, Rudolph was the first Christmas special for children created by 1960s Mad Men. It was written by an ad copywriter for a department store as a kind of giveaway. And up till that point, there had only been very high-minded operatic kind of specials on television for children like Babes in Toyland or a version of that. And Rudolph was the first kind of original cartoon, except it was done with beautiful Japanese puppets, of this story about, as we know, the reindeer that had the light up nose and he didn't fit in, but in the end he saves the day. But if you watch the cartoon, as Caitlin did recently for this article, it's a very dark story, starting with the rejection of Rudolph by his father. Hermie, the elf, if you remember him, who just wanted to be a dentist, is driven from the elf workshop because by a really an officious elf, they're non-unionized elves clearly making these toys, and he's driven from the Santa's workshop by this officious elf. Santa.
Humiliated.
He's humiliated and taunted for not wanting to make toys, but wanting to be a dentist. And so she has said that and then she made some analogies that, Hermie was like the original gay kid that.
Oh, clearly. Absolutely.
and the way, and they of course all ran away to this island of misfit toys, which is its own tragedy of a sort of gulag archipelago with a doll with psychiatric problems.
Okay, which the writer actually acknowledged, right?
Right. Yeah, that was because otherwise from the outside she didn't look like there was anything wrong with her.
Right.
With a little polka dot dress, a dolly for Sue. Yes.
A dolly for Sue was
cry a lot. She was maybe a depressive little dolly.
Depressive.
But I can I say so this is Meghan, and I will say that Rudolph is a treasured artifact in our family. My 5 children and I, and maybe sometimes my husband, we love that movie, and every year we watch it. It's a kind of an event, and everyone competes to point out the little scenes and the moments that they love the most. All of the stuff that Caitlin identified in her article, I think it's very clearly there. And in recent years, it really seems like a parable of the 60s commenting on the 50s, it was a kind of valorizing of the odd guy out, but also not, in no way softening what it is really like to be when you're really an oddball in a conformist society that wants to punish oddballs. But I think that's one of the things that's so brilliant about it, because it is kind of morally real. It's not saccharine. I mean, the dad not accepting his son because he had a little something wonky with him, that's very painful, right? No question. But this is also Rudolph's hero's journey, right? He's thrown from the nest, and he has to kind of become
the hay, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was born in a manger. So
a cave. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. But no, I think that her critique of it is spot on. The mistake she makes is in saying that you shouldn't subject your children to it. And that is absolutely wrong, because it's a visual feast is what I will say. It's a
Christmas. Hey, Megan, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think that, if you had little kids now, do you think that you would have the conversation with them about, the pain, the agony that both Rudolph and Hermie experienced at the hands of their abusers?
That's interesting.
I don't know that it would be necessary to do that. I mean, I did have littles and we did watch it, and it was kind of clear.
Was it? Or why do you think it was clear to your kids?
That's a good question. How can I say it? How do I know it's clear? I suppose it was kind of in the air, and it was the conversation. I mean, you can't watch it, when you're little and not think, oh, it's really mean, because it is really mean. People are really mean. And even now when we watch, we're all actually the character who scandalizes my children most is actually Santa Claus.
Mm-hmm.
He's so utilitarian. He's so mercantilist, It is actually the pressure from the man, from Santa, that causes the reindeer to have this real conformist attitude and to, run this brutal meritocracy. And everyone, when Rudolph can fly really well, everyone thinks he's great. So I think that honestly, I don't think children have to be spoon-fed that. I think they see it and they know it. And yeah, anyway, I just, I think there is, we are falling as a culture into the idea that if something is portrayed, it is somehow endorsing the thing that is being portrayed. And I just don't think that's right. I think that, you can read a book in which bad people are actors and not think, well, that's validating bad behavior. You can see the whole moral arc of things.
And also, there's also the tendency that, we have to quote unquote protect kids, right? From, bad things that happen in the world.
Yeah.
When the reality is that actually, as you pointed out yourself, kids can handle this, and in fact, I think we miss a huge opportunity by not having some of the deeper conversations with them, about whether if they were in Hermie's hooves, I guess, would they stick around? Would they speak truth to power? What does truth even mean in this case? And, if you are less powerful, does that mean you are powerless? Like, these are big questions.
Oh, it's full of big questions.
Yeah.
But it's also full of hilarious little moments, like when Yukon Cornelius, sorry, Danielle, I'm sure you don't want us to go on and on about Rudolph.
No, I
could just the whole hour I could talk about. No, Yukon Cornelius is constantly searching for gold, right? Gold, silver and gold he's searching for. And at one point he whacks his ice axe into a promontory of ice, and he licks it like this, and his little, like this perfect pink tongue comes out, and he's disappointed. Nothing, he says.
I have another analogy, which is almost as stark, but Megan, actually, I think you said something profound. I'd never thought about this before. And David and I, through COVID, have been going through a series, and we've been watching very belatedly Mad Men, and are just gripped by. We came to Breaking Bad like 5 years after everybody else, so we are like totally gripped by Mad Men. That idea of the 50s, the 60s rejecting the 50s, I think is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
I always had this analogy, like Arthur Rankin and Jules Bass were both Jewish. I actually knew Arthur Rankin. I met him when I was on assignment in Bermuda, of all places.
Wow.
And he had this.
Explain who they are, Danielle.
Okay, so they were apparently ad men. I didn't realize this, but they became very successful TV producers, especially of cartoons of this kind. But they're both Jewish. And I always
thought, Rudolph, right? They wrote Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
No, they didn't write the original story, but they created the cartoon. A fun Canadian fact, Irshad, for you from Caitlin's article, that the person who voiced Rudolph was Canadian, and the reason they signed a Canadian, so she wouldn't. I think it was a she. It was the name was Billy, but I think it was a she. Wouldn't get residuals, and then when this hit. And she apparently for her life,
not America, it's Scamerica.
Yeah, just totally scammed her. But anyway, sorry, this is taking a dark turn for the Jews. I just don't want to. But I took it as an analogy of a complete parable of anti-Semitism. That okay, now just stay with me, Rudolph. What is his problem? He has a very awkward nose, and he is rejected by the others. And Hermie, what does he want to be? A dentist.
And they wind up running the place.
There you go.
The Jews.
The island of misfit toys.
Right.
Sent away. They are exiled. But then they come back. Yes.
And Santa only wants them on commercial terms. He's not.
Right.
Yeah,
maybe Santa is
actually, Danielle, next year you write the piece for The Atlantic. That's a really brilliant insight. That's really good.
All right, but I think it did capture the darkness. I love giving personalized gifts over the holidays. They're original and show you've thought really hard about the person receiving them. Well, here's a line of Luke's personalized hair products that any woman in your life would love to receive. Although, to be honest, you will want these for yourself as well. The brand is called Prose. As we know, there's no one size fits all when it comes to shampoo and conditioner. We need products that are suited for our unique needs and don't leave us disappointed. But thanks to my personalized Prose shampoo and conditioner, I've fallen in love with my hair again, which if you knew my hair, it's pretty hard to do. Prose knows there is more to you than just your hair type. Prose has given over 1 million consultations with their in-depth hair quiz, which is how I got started. So when I went online to order, it was really fun. They asked me this very detailed quiz about the quirks of my hair, not just that it's thin and dry, hello middle age, but also about my eating habits, my workouts, and even my zip code, which is how it knew I'd need something to combat the summer humidity of Washington, D.C. And with their algorithm and over 50 billion formula combinations, Prose determined a unique blend of ingredients to treat my exact concerns. Well, the products arrived just beautifully packaged with my name on them, which is super cool. And after a month of use, my hair really is. It's softer and shinier, fuller and stronger. I noticed that I don't now have to wash it every day like I used to. It looks great for days. And I especially love the leave-in conditioner and pre-mask shampoos. I use hair dryers and curling irons sometimes. So I feel that those products are really protecting. For the holidays, I discovered they have a limited edition leave-in sparkling hair oil. So even if you're not going out to any parties this season, you can bring the holiday party to your hair. I know I will. And the greatest thing about Prose is if you're not 100% positive it's the best hair care product you've had, they will take the products back, no questions asked. So Prose is the healthy hair regimen with your name all over it. Take your free in-depth hair quiz and get 15% off your first order today. Go to prose.com/femsplain. That's prose.com/femsplain for your free in-depth hair quiz and 15% off. And just look forward to having beautiful hair. So we got speaking of darkness, we have a dark Christmas. Many are going to be separated from their families. We're hoping this is the last Christmas or holiday season. I mean, we do in our household celebrate Hanukkah. Irshad, you just are just rejecting all of the holiday season in your Muslim-y way.
I'm gonna let you all in on a little secret. I love the fact that not being Christian means that I can save a hell of a lot of money over the holiday. by not having to buy expensive, or for that matter, even cheap gifts for my friends and other loved ones. Okay. My excuse is a genuine one. I don't believe. And what I don't believe in commercialization. I don't believe in materialism. What I do believe in, though, this is joyous, I do believe in Christ. And I say that as a Muslim because anybody who knows even a sliver about Islam knows that Jesus is a top tier prophet in Islam. So this is not a rejection of the spirituality of Christmas, quite the opposite. It is a reclamation of it.
But you're worrying me because I'm guessing that my expensive present isn't coming this year from you.
Well, my cashmere scarf.
I was always told it was the thought that counts.
Oh, damn it.
Well, I was as a convert to Judaism, as Meghan knows, well, I have two approaches now to Christmas. First of all, I'm a schnorrer, which rhymes with menorah, which a schnorrer is a Yiddish term for somebody who just like freeloads on other people. So I'm a Christmas schnorrer. I come to your house, Meghan, and I inhale your tree and you pour me hot beverages. And I say, isn't Christmas lovely? But also take the earshot thing, and I don't have to do anything about it. I just get to enjoy everybody else's labor this year. But I love the, actually, I'm going to be really bad, but I love the non-religious aspect of the time, of all the sparkles and good cheer. And as a Jew, we started to decorate our house with lights, which was sort of frowned on in North America. But until my son, when he was 7, said, "Mom, it's a festival of lights. Why can't we have lights?" So I went to my rabbi, who was Orthodox. I said, "Can we have lights?" And he goes, "Yes." And so now every year we just light up our house with lights, and it's lovely. So I love the whole feeling of this time of year.
Oh, me too. Danielle, do you think you're having any effect on the larger Jewish community? I mean, are people?
Well, I had effect on my rabbi because he now, once I started doing this, and I said to him, "Rabbi, cedar is all over Lebanon and the Holy Land, and it's juniper, all these, And my first year, I made a Star of David out of boughs, and then decorated it with I found ornaments that were like pickles and cups of coffee and bagels. And now I don't even bother. I have you've seen it on our house. I made one year a huge Star of David out of birch logs, wrapped it in blue lights and put it on the top of our house. And every year it flashes to the cars in front of go by our house. And people stop and go, wait, what? Is that a Star of David? And it is. No, but my rabbi now is the most garishly lit house in his neighborhood. I unleashed.
But Danielle, here's the real litmus test, okay, of how much you've assimilated or not. Do you sing "Oi to the World"?
No. I play the piano, and we play all the popular. But don't forget, Jews invented modern Christmas. I mean, the Germans and Victorians, but all the great Christmas songs, Irving Berlin.
Right.
You're welcome, people. So given this is the last podcast of our year, and good riddance to 2020, man. I wanted to go. We have just this whole mailbag from our listeners, and we have such great listener feedback. And some of it, Meghan, is about episodes you were on, Irshad, same. So I thought we could just go through this year end and read some of the great comments and questions we've had from our listeners. Santa's mailbag, as it were.
Serious Santa.
So Meghan, so I gave you all little printouts or things to print out. And you have the first listener letter, which is from one of our most beloved listeners. And can I mention supporter? And can I mention after we finish recording this, we're going right into a holiday party with our subscribers at Patreon and Glow.com.
Ready to go here.
So, hey, if you didn't subscribe, you're missing hanging out with us after this podcast. But anyway, Lana is also a subscriber. So thank you for that. And Megan, go. What did Lana write to us about?
So Lana was responding to, we were talking about an article that was in National Geographic. And I made the observation, we were talking about this fact that a mummified woman's body was found with hunting tools. And the magazine was, in kind of obeisance to modern, or I implied anyway, to modern expectations of absolute stringent gender neutrality on all things and not, gendering anyone. The magazine suggested that, we couldn't be sure whether this woman this dead, biological woman had lived as a woman. All right. So Lana writes, hello.
Yes, they said, as National Geographic said, they were saying it was female, but they wasn't sure. They couldn't say how she would have identified at the time.
Okay. Anyway, but Lana, okay, so Lana has a corrective here. Lana says, hello, I was amused by the National Geographic's disclaimer about the gender identity of an ancient female hunter. At the same time, dismissing the idea of gender nonconformance in ancient or traditional hunter-gatherer societies is also wrong. Anthropology is a side hobby of mine, so let me pass along a few nuggets I've come across. Recently, I read a book called Chronicles of Guayaki Indians that was originally published in France in 1972. The author profiles two men in the tribe who did not fit the traditional male role. One fraternizes entirely with the women, carries a basket for gathering, and will not touch a bow, which is a taboo item for an object for a woman. The other still carries a bow, but hasn't killed anything in recent memory and is considered generally the tribal weirdo. The author presumes that the first man, and possibly the second, is gay. Today, Lana says, I suppose he would be presumed trans. While reading about the Kung of the Kalahari, I recall mention also of a man who simply refused to hunt. He never underwent the official manhood ritual transition, but he did get married and have a family. His family only ate meat by the grace of the rest of the tribe. There was also mention of a girl who refused to marry. Women who hunt against social norms are much harder to find, probably because of the amount of instruction that would be required. In very egalitarian societies, there's no real punishment for refusing social roles except general mockery and mild shunning.
Rudolph.
Exactly.
It wasn't mild.
And people can learn to live with that. So non-gender conforming behavior does seem to occur even in traditional societies with strong gender roles. The probability of us finding the body of a rare social rebel seems small, but improbable things happen all the time. That said, the evidence is strong that a gender nonconforming female hunter would not be laid to rest in an elaborate burial with all her tools, honoring her hunting prowess. Well, thank you, Lana, for that very thorough and decent perspective.
I mean, yeah, it could be like she may have just been a female queen, and then
well, I wondered that too, a mother of dragons kind of thing.
Mother of dragons, right? All right, Irshad, thank you, Lana. That was amazing. Thank you.
Okay, so a lot of feedback on our episode, Danielle, yours and mine, with Alan, the Trump-loving husband who has a Trump-hating wife. So Megan writes, but a different Megan than the one you just heard from. Right. Irshad and Danielle did a wonderful job with their questions to the Trump-loving husband. They were as good as any therapist. I wonder if the fact you are both Canadians made it easier to remain objective and with a neutral tone. I think the Trump lover is sincere. However, when you asked him what he has learned from his Trump-hating wife, he did not seem to have anything to say. It means most likely that he isn't really interested in understanding her or listening to her perspective. He came on to reassure himself that he is right. My guess is the left-leaning wife refused the podcast because she's disconnected from him, and he knows it. If I were a betting lady, I would say the marriage will not last as the kids get older, although I hope I'm wrong. They clearly value family, but that's not enough to sustain a marriage when they disagree on so many other values. If I were advising them, I would send them to a couples counselor.
Ouch.
Ouch. I have to, though, part company with Megan on her prediction that she doesn't think the marriage will last. I said a little bit about this in our episode at the time, that Alan and his wife seemed to have a lot of other stuff to talk about. In fact, you might remember, Danielle, I asked him, so, how are you two going to deal with this huge chasm politically? And he said, we just agree not to talk about politics, and we have no shortage of other subjects to discuss. And I said to you, I remember this clearly, I said to you in our wind down in that episode that that really bodes well for their marriage, because I remember when I was married, all we could talk about was politics. We were both, we were the furthest thing from fans of Trump. And it actually occurred to me as our marriage was dissolving and Trump's campaign was gaining strength, it occurred to me, if this man isn't elected president, we'll have nothing more to say to each other.
You were both bound by your hatred, as it were.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to add to this. Meghan, I think, had a very perceptive reading of that call, but I've since become a kind of pen pal with Alan, and he's been sending me updates. And yes, his wife didn't want to come on, and it should be stressed that she is a self-described woman of color. And this was also part of the tension because she felt he didn't understand the things that she was going through. She is of Indian origin. And they were also having arguments. Well, no, they weren't having arguments. They were just, as this Cold War was going on about teaching they have 3 daughters whom they homeschool, and they were teaching them history. And Columbus Day came up, and, she gave them one version, and then he gave them another version. And then, it all exploded. But so she didn't want to come on, understandably, but she did listen to the podcast. And he said she got really mad at him for characterizing this way they were arguing about raising the children. She felt that, he was accusing her on air of undermining her. But after they got through that, they did begin to speak. And she agreed to read a book of his choosing. And then he said that he would read a book of her choosing. Now, the book he chose was a book by Thomas Sowell, and she's going to read that. And I said, what did she choose for you, Alan? Like White Fragility? I'm really hoping that that's the book she chose for you. But no, so in a sense that I'm very pleased that the podcast, even though it started a little combustion in that marriage, it seemed to have opened the dialogue, and it has. And I think especially since Trump lost, he said his wife was being very sympathetic and gentle with him. And as he goes through his period, as he put it, mourning and grief and denial. But it does seem to have had, some positive effect. So they are now talking about it. And I think that's a great thing, because as you pointed out, Irshad, they had a lot of other things in common, but I think why we found them so interesting is they were kind of emblematic of the nation. Like you had these two sides that were in bed together, but couldn't speak to each other.
The nation should be listening to Femsplainers.
The whole nation really, and they should all be subscribing. We had a couple more comments on that, right? Like this is happening to people everywhere.
Do you want me to read the next one?
Yeah. There's a couple of short ones, which I thought was just
So Magic writes, my marriage dissolved the more and more we realized the ideological gulf between us couldn't be crossed. I'm center/center right for the most part. My solution was we should be apolitical. She's left. Apolitical wasn't good enough. Marriage ended. 2016 apparently was a game changer.
Wow.
I get it, Magic. I get it. Because I lost my first serious girlfriend over the fact that I was a liberal and she was a radical. And she dumped me over my refusal to become an extremist.
Wow.
But I had the last laugh because she married a guy many years afterwards, and now they have 2 kids. And frankly, I think my life is probably more liberated as a result of.
Well, I always like people say, everything has a reason. And then you go, childhood cancer, airplane crashes. I don't think so. But sometimes things, work out for the best, I guess is is what we want to say. Yeah. And I think this COVID is having, just before we started the podcast, we were talking about people we know who on all political spectrums are going kind of crazy. I mean, they're getting caught up in social media algorithms, and the effects of COVID and being pent up for months and months and really not having a lot of human interaction. I mean, in person or socially in the way we did before this, it's going to be a fascinating thing of what comes out of it that I think, Irshad, you said is going to stretch for years potentially.
I think we're going to be either dealing with or perhaps not dealing with the fallout, the mental health fallout of COVID for a good 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. The next listener feedback we had was about our episode with Barbara Emile, Lady Black, and her really incredible and racy memoir. And Caitlin Flanagan had joined me for that. And we had this, I mean, I just feel like in these situations, an anthropologist, when I'm talking to someone, I feel like Margaret Mead, I was talking to Barbara to explain all the social levels in New York and the importance of jewels and jewelry, which is very large in certain female circles of New York. And after the podcast, Caitlin said, I think I'm going to become a Marxist. And it was the jewelry, the discussion on jewelry and important jewelry that set her up. Because I had made the mistake of asking Barbara, who was herself kind of obsessed with jewelry, who cares, right? And isn't jewelry a stupid investment? Like, or at least David is always telling me this, and maybe it's revealing, but I said, doesn't it just like lose its value the minute you drive it off the lot like a car? You know, like why it's fun to love it and like it as baubles, but these women are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on jewelry. And Barbara corrected me on that and said, no. So if you get the right type of jewels, it's why people used to sew them into their hems when they were fleeing Europe. Like they do retain a certain monetary value. So we had Rosalind write to us and she said, what a great interview. One note about the importance of the jewels. The jewels are incredibly important, and this goes back centuries. The relevance of value, clarity, size, and line of possession is what most women born into this lifestyle understand. If your kingdom, if you will, is overthrown, those items may be your only saving grace. It's your security blanket. Over time, it has evolved into your sterling, couture, china, and real estate. Women were never entitled to real estate on their own until the last century, so that's new. In today's world, those jewels can really be the things that support a woman in the event of tragedy. I know it sounds superficial, but that is historically the reason why. All vapid personalities aside, it may make you understand it's more ingrained than simply one-upmanship. And I also noted in that it was a lot. Importance increases depending on what number wife you are. Like for second and third wives, where you may have rivalry from progeny, that it becomes all the more important to have a safe of jewels if you're worried that you're not going to get any access to inheritance or property, to put it coldly.
Little tragic coda to that. The Russian royal family, the girls had, when they were taken by the Bolsheviks, they were sturdier around the waist than they normally would have been because they had spent the weeks before their captivities people sewed all their jewels into their bodices.
Right.
But the awful thing is that when they were hauled out and finally they were being shot, the bullets bounced off them. They ricocheted. They had to finish them off up close. That's actually what happened.
So what you're saying, those were one hell of a set of jewels.
Oh, I think they must have been stupendous. I mean, the Russian royal family. I mean, this is the Romanovs.
Like those would have gotten a lot at Sotheby's, is what you're trying to tell us.
Yeah, unfortunately, Lenin and his crowd got them and got to spend them on tanks eventually. I guess.
I just want to say, as the first wife, you never get to see money go to jewels. It's always going to things like fixing the air conditioning system.
Roofs.
School fees.
Yes.
Well, it's that time of year when we all start reassessing our diets. I've actually been on a strict diet for about 6 weeks now, one that pays acute attention to calories. So finding foods that are low in carbs, high in protein, and frankly tasty can be a challenge. I'd all but given up on cereals, including granola, because so much of them are just filled with sugar and junk you shouldn't eat. But thanks to Magic Spoon, I've discovered that a healthy breakfast doesn't have to be boring. And we all know how important it is to eat breakfast for a great start to the day. There is 0 sugar, 11 grams of protein, and only 3 net grams of carbs in each serving of Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon is keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, low-carb, and even GMO-free. And there are 4 flavors: cocoa, fruity, frosted, and my favorite, blueberry, because I love adding fresh blueberries to, well, anything. And they all taste amazing. Honestly, too good to be true. But you don't have to choose just one flavor. Go to magicspoon.com/femsplainers to grab a variety pack and try all the flavors today. And be sure to use our promo code FEMSPLAINERS at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their cereal, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. That's magicspoon.com/femsplainers and use the code FEMSPLAINERS to save $5 off. And we thank Magic Spoon for being one of our sponsors for this podcast.
So I have a letter to read from Shauna, and Shauna's a little spicy here. Now, I hope that
spicy
our editor will bleep. I hope if I
we're kind of grown up around here. What is this episode? What is Shauna writing?
All right, so Shauna's writing about the Thanksgiving episode with Peggy Noonan and Leon Wieseltier, and it was why can't we all get along? So Shauna says. And I'm telling you, she's got some sauce here. She says,
she's great.
So in Peggy's hunt for us all to be less partisan, her opening salvo is a partisan attack on AOC. That does not bode well for turning down the tribal heat, says Shauna. AOC is fascinating to me. I don't agree with much of her politics, but I think she's bright, idealistic, charismatic, and frankly beautiful. And it's fascinating how she sets other people off, namely Ted Cruz, whose fights seem to border on sexual obsession. Bully the pretty girl who won't have you. Lest we forget AOC's male colleague calling her a fucking bitch on the Capitol steps and her masterclass response/speech that perhaps we'd all be better served if we removed such calling of our female colleagues who we happen to disagree with from the workplace. This young woman really upsets the old guard in such a visceral, emotional way. Even Peggy, I just find it interesting to observe. Again, this is Shauna, not me. Either way, I'm not sure hyperpartisan Noonan is the one to lead the way on turning down the zero-sum political game heat, but more power to her, Godspeed. But there's simply too much money to be made off hyperpartisanship. The algorithms, previously mentioned this hour, have been hacked, and the American brain goes right along with it. Nothing will change until the money incentive goes away for Facebook, et cetera. Nothing. And Leon, I listened, open-minded, but then I reread an Atlantic piece on his the New Republic era, and oof, I grant that it's complicated. Not everyone is Weinstein, or that is to say Harvey, or Les Moonves, nor is anyone the worst thing they ever did. I believe in forgiveness, prison reform, etc. But I'm also, she says, a 43-year-old woman who came into my career, often the only woman in mostly boys' club situations, precocious and cute in my 20s, and I took all that creepy, flirty shit and threw it right back with insouciance. I cultivated a shrewd persona, the boozy, bawdy, fun broad, and it helped me. It did. And yes, sometimes I honestly did have fun with those old guys, but man, what a fucking tap dance to dodge their physical advances. Right? I remember that stuff. I always had to keep my eye on the door and the other door and sometimes the window. I had to be firm with my boundaries. Be gentle, don't hurt his ego, he signs your check, and still wriggled away from too many unwanted kisses and far too many hotel room meetings on business trips. I can still do a high-heeled sprint to a hotel elevator faster than anyone. Okay, Shauna, I'll race you next time. That shit was exhausting. And I am so glad I don't dance that dance anymore. So glad. The men referring me for jobs now do so based on my skills, just like the women who refer me. It's less of a boys' club than when I started. And also, that's also great. And I can refer young women and men without making them feel like they owe me sexually. And yes, Sean writes, there are still plenty of late night parties and booze and naughty jokes and hijinks pre-pandemic, but the sexual favor threat is gone now mostly, and I, for one, do not miss it. So, Leon. I've known some Leons, charismatic old lions with great minds and masters of conversation, which, by the way, is true in his case. I think it's partly generational, partly an expression of, I'm such a rakish scamp, partly an expression of his misguided love for women.
She puts love in quotes.
Yep.
Yeah, she does put love in quotes. But also partly a darker truth. He got to wield power over women he desired, but couldn't have by making them feel uncomfortable at their jobs where their careers were dependent upon him. And I can't help wondering, where is the young woman who got fired from TNR for reporting Leon's harassment? What has he done to make amends for her career and the others? Does she have a literary magazine? I'm curious. Well, that's what I want to know when these gentlemen come back. What have you done to earn your way back? What's the phrase now? Restorative justice? Where's the restoration?
Oh, it's such a great letter. Oh my God, Shauna, thank you.
Do you agree, Megan, that men generally don't earn their restoration? And here's what I mean by that. It seems to me that the public shaming to their long built up reputations could be like literally the end of them, because in a sense, that's all they've got.
Yeah, it's public death.
So if they can survive that, is that not, compensation enough?
Oh, I think so. I mean, it's complicated, as Shauna refers to in her letter. I mean, there's a great spectrum of people. Myself, I absolutely think that it's clear that public shaming and ostracization is, it can be experienced almost as physical pain. I mean, and I do think that there is, there are an awful lot of people have been swept up by this net. I mean, we're in the middle of a vast cultural revolution in so many different dimensions. And this Me Too stuff was part of it. It was, some of it was really egregious predators who were finally being exposed, and bravo for that. And some of it was men and women too, who have simply participated in culture and kind of taken, drawn their conclusions about what the rules are from how people around them behave. And now they're being held, culpable by new standards. So I think it's, there's a lot of unforgiveness, and forgiveness is absolutely necessary. There's no way forward for anyone without forgiveness. That's why I'm a Christian.
And that's, by the way, that's what Leon said. He wrote a long essay about forgiveness in his new journal, which we talked about. But, it's funny. I think I said it earlier in the program that David and I have been watching Mad Men, and my mother was can I just say, very hot reporter in that
still hot
age. And she went through it. And we talked about this with Barbara Black on the program. Like, she was, oh my God, she was a almost man eater, but I was struck by the ritual humiliations that women were just put through, ritual and very casual. And it's had me rethinking a lot about my own attitudes, because if you talk to my mother or you talk to Barbara, they say, no, we felt power. Like they took pleasure in they sort of chalked up the humiliation as a quid pro quo for what they could control with their sexual power. And then when we came along, we just took all of it for granted that it didn't happen anymore, or to the degree that it did. But
I had some.
No, sorry, to the degree that it did. But we I don't know. We were one step farther along in the feminist journey, as it were, and we were bequeathed a lot of good things by, the 70s feminists. And I now understand when I look back of where they were coming from. And when you look about, we were talking about Rudolph as, the 60s comment on the 50s, and the 70s feminism is a comment on the 60s and 50s situation of women, which in many ways was appalling and humiliating. And these things take time. And Meghan, you and I are contemporaries, and Irshad, and we handled them in our own way. But I agree with Shauna that it is. I think that's what I was excited about with the Me Too movement. I had no interest in sending men away and canceling and things. And obviously the egregious parties needed to be punished, but I was just so excited by these microaggressions. Can we call them that without rolling our eyes? That this sense that, treat a woman respectfully, treat her as your equal, and don't get into these situations that are no good for anybody. That being said, I kind of enjoyed a little bit of the sexual dynamics.
Oh yeah, that's
of the old newsroom.
Sexuality is...
I don't want like flirtation to be dead, but I guess it just can't happen in an office.
But when that stuff all blew up, every woman I know was having kind of Me Too flashbacks.
Right, and angry, right? Like I shouldn't have had to put up with that.
I remember there was I was once grabbed at a party in New York and kissed in a deeply unpleasant and unexpected way by somebody anyway, he's still in New York. He's a powerful guy in New York. And I thought, I could ruin this guy.
Yeah.
I don't want that kind of power, but it was horrible what had happened. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Anyway, but
I just want to jump in here and say something that you mentioned about, Barbara Emile Black, and during her rise in her career, she actually felt a sense of relishing the power that she had over men who wanted to put her in her place. And I think really this is one of the many things that, critical theory gets wrong, is that it treats power dynamics as if they are static. Right. And any personal experience would tell you that power is fluid. It is situational. You can have it in one context and not have much of it in another. And to the degree that, critical theory calcifies power, it is completely unrepresentative of reality.
Yep, that's right. And because a beautiful woman, for instance, has immense power. And actually there's Sebastian Junger in his book Tribe talks about this, how for a woman, even a dowdy woman, can expect to have preferential treatment as she goes about her way in the world. And for a man, an able-bodied man, he has to be in his 70s before he gets anything like the consideration from society that a decent-looking woman does. And not you don't have to be you don't.
Well, 70s. I've always described the power imbalance. Like women in their 20s have the same power, especially if they're attractive. And there's a whole other side conversations on that, but have a similar power to middle-aged men who are wealthy. And
yes, but in terms of if one of those two parties needs a tire that is flat to be inflated.
I see what you mean. There are a lot of 70-year-old men who do not feel powerful.
No. I'm talking. What I'm talking about is recognition from society as having a status that is deserving of some kind of elevation. So an ordinary-looking young woman she's just treated well. If she asks for help, people give her help. But a man is not, especially a strong man, gets nothing like that from the rest of the world until he's an old man. And then people are like, oh, I'll give him a seat on the train. So that's the kind of power I'm talking about.
I don't know.
Well, it's I can say.
I don't know. I know. I'm just pondering all the different powers that we come from. Yeah.
Right. But Irshad's point is exactly right. It's fluid. It's dynamic.
There are a lot of 30-year-old single men who are wielding crazy power over unmarried 30-something single women too. And even though we're not supposed to acknowledge that.
They're writing the algorithms that are controlling our brain.
All right.
Into those algorithms.
I have a last one. I'm going to read one more because we're running out of time. And I see that in our waiting room, for our cocktail party. People are starting to gather in our Zoom waiting room. So just again, if you want to support the podcast, which truly we need, please join us at patreon.com/femsplainers. Pay whatever you can afford, a drink a month. We'd appreciate it. And you get not only a secret bonus episode every month. Well, it's not secret if you belong, you get it. Called Last Call, where you get to ask the questions of all our guests. But we're doing these now monthly gatherings where you get to come and hang out and booze with us. So please help the podcast. So what I was going to say is I had one other very long email from a young woman that I got into quite a pen pal relationship with. Her name was Mary. And I think I'm gonna roll this over, Mary, forgive me for the new season, because I want both of you to weigh in on it. And it will be relevant then, but it's a lot about what we were talking about, politics and judgment and identity. So I'm going to roll that over because I want to end this on a episode about the crown, on our royals issue with Charles Moore, Lord Charles Moore, Meghan, which you joined me for. Yes. And this is really just, I mean, he's the official biographer of Margaret Thatcher. It was really my excuse to spend a whole hour talking about the royals, which I've wanted to do. And we loosely based it on the crown. And as you know, Meghan, Charles was a very good sport with his vast knowledge of England and history and hierarchy of the royals, humored us on this. But this is from also a beloved listener, Patreon subscriber, Sheldon. He said, I once read an op-ed that said Canadians are forever struggling to figure out whether they are British, French, or American. But one thing I'll never have in common with them is their obsession with the royal family. Maybe it's due to my Southern roots, but the very notion of making demigods of these descendants of murderers and thieves is abhorrent to me. They're a drain on the public. And their entire system keeps the Brits tied to the idea that your blood, i.e. heritage, gives you superiority or inferiority. That's something we should have outgrown by the 21st century. That said, I love a good period piece, and I've enjoyed watching The Crown. I also enjoyed watching Victoria. In both cases, though, I think they're popular these days because they're about powerful women, which is just so much gender pandering. More to the point of this interview. I look forward to learning more about the Iron Lady. She's only tangential to the story in this season's The Crown, but I'm curious to learn more about her. Back in the 80s, I really just saw her as a slightly more feminine version of Ronald Reagan, who I despised.
And only slightly more.
Well, I think what was fascinating to me, and all three of us were all pretty much contemporaries, and Margaret Thatcher is as vivid and real to me now as she was then. But my kids started watching The Crown, and like, who was Margaret Thatcher? Really, you realize, no, she's lost. She's now a figure of history like Winston Churchill. And we talked about, I think what was lost in The Crown, and we talked about this with Charles, was that what she accomplished in her term as prime minister and, coming into England as it was, and the economy and her wonderful female qualities, her practicality and her absolute steeliness, speaking of like facing down all male cabinets and things, and just dragged and pulled England into the modern world and really did a phenomenal amount, and did it. Reagan did it more cheerfully, but they were both confronting, the fallout, economic and Cold War fallout of the 70s. Yeah. And they both did a remarkable transformation and against just absolute hatred and vitriol from their critics. So Charles felt that she was fairly portrayed, but that her achievements, they were very much about showing all the negatives of who she was, but very little about the positives.
Yeah, The Crown didn't really show the piles of garbage in the Winter of Discontent or the unburied bodies. And I haven't finished the season, so maybe it does, but I don't think it showed like the influx of wine bars. That was one of the most visible results in London.
Right.
You remember those wine bars in those years? They were fantastic. They all had names like bubbles and fizzy and that kind of thing. It was great.
Well, we're all back into a new era with Brexit, and God knows what's going to happen, but we'll see.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it on the Femsplainers.
Of course. Well, look, I'm seeing people piling up in our Zoom virtual waiting room for the party that's to follow. So we'll stay on for that. But to our listeners, thank you so much for being a part of our Femsplainer community. We wish you the healthiest, safest, joyous of New Year's. We just want to kick 2020 to the curb.
I'm looking forward to being in hindsight, right?
In hindsight. And we're going to rejoin in January. We'll have a whole new wonderful program of great guests and everything and topics. But just thank you to you all. Thank you for being a part of our show. Thank you, Irshad. Thank you, Megan, for being here.
Bye, everybody.
Pleasure. Peace out, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. The Femsplainers is a weekly podcast carried on the Ricochet Network and available pretty much on every podcast platform. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and watch video of our interviews on YouTube. You'll find links to everything, plus how to contact us directly at femsplainers.com. We survive and depend on your support. Like the show? Consider donating as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/femsplainers and get our exclusive monthly bonus episode, Last Call, in which you get to join the conversation with our guests. And there's much more. And a big shout out of thanks to our audio and video editor, Nat Frum.